This question shows you the cost of producing a certain number of units in a factory, and you're asked to find the average rate of change when the production level changes from 100 units to 105 units, and then 100 units to 101 units, and then it wants the instantaneous rate of change when you reach 100 units of production. Now, if you look at the graph here, it's a very, very steep parabola. If you put this into your calculator, it's not really going to be able to show you a lot because you have to zoom out so much. So we're going to use this by understanding that the rate of change is the gradient at that point, like when we were doing the dive example. So if I was to really zoom in to where it's 100 and 105, then I'm looking at what is the rate of change between this point and this point. So that rate of change, if we're going to look at what is the gradient here, now that we pretty much can draw a straight line there, and we're going to look at the gradient, which is rise over run. So what's the difference here and the difference here? Well, this is just 5 because it's between 100 and 105. Now what about here? We would need to put that into the equation. So what I have to do is find the cost of 105 units, so I'd plug that into N here, and the cost for 100 units, plug that into there, and subtract them, and divide by the difference in number of units, which is 5. And these are the values I get. This is the cost of 105 units, this is the cost of 100 units, and then I divide that by 5, and so the cost here gives me $20.25 per unit. That's the average rate of change there at that production level. This question here says, what's the average rate of change when I'm producing between going from 101 units to from 100 units to 101 units? So then I put this into the cost function, these two values into the cost function, and I divide that by the difference in the numbers from 100 to 101. That's just 1, and this is what I get. So this is telling me that if I go from 100 units to 101 units, this is what it's going to cost me per unit. But the next question is very interesting. It says, what's the instantaneous rate of change when there's 100 units, and explain what that means. Well, it's not giving me the difference of 2, so I have to differentiate the cost function to find a gradient function. So let's try that. So I'm going to differentiate this to find my gradient function. So remember, take the 2 to the front, so it's 2 times 0.05, and now I just have n, because I've taken one from there, and then I have 10, and of course I don't need to worry about this constant. So let's calculate that all out. So we've got 0.1n plus 10, and the question was asking me for what is the average rate of change when production level is at 100 units. So then I want this. And that means it's going to cost me $20 per unit. And what does that mean? Well, they're asking you to explain it. And what we've worked out is that it costs more than $20 per unit to produce units once you get above the 100th unit. Okay, so that's what it's saying. It's saying it costs more than $20 per unit to produce units after the 100th unit. And that's exactly what we've worked out there. I hope that helps a bit. And of course, now that I've got this this particular gradient function here, I can use that. I could find out what the average rate of change is at any particular production amount as I'm going along. Okay, I hope that helps a bit more.